Om Tat Sat. Good evening, friends, and greetings to everybody who's watching online as well. We'll continue with the illuminating episode of the Right Honorable V.S. Srinivasa Shastri. Speaking about him, D.V. Gundappa relates several episodes, and many of them bring to light in great highlight his personality. There are many books that have been written about him, starting from the definitive biography by P. Kodandarao. But the kind of insights and the kind of wonderful vignettes we see in these pages, we don't find anywhere else, because this is a long association of D.V. Gundappa, very close association with Srinivasa Shastri. Therefore, he is able to bring out so many remarkable episodes from Srinivasa Shastri's life. So once D.V. Gundappa and Srinivasa Shastri, his group of friends, had met in S.G. Shastri's house. S.G. Shastri was famously known as the Soap Shastri. His father was a very well-known scholar. So the S.G. Shastri's house, they were having a discussion, and suddenly the topic, as was usual, used to traverse a wide array of topics, and one topic went towards English literature. And they were discussing about English literature, and then there was an anthology of poems by William Wordsworth, which was kept on the side table. And immediately Shastri remembered some of the poems, and he started reciting a couple of poems. The method of reciting was very interesting. DVG says, Avilambitam adrutam, like it is said in the Ramayana, neither too slow nor too fast. And the way in which he recited these poems and the stress he laid on certain syllables and the voice modulation, the emotional presentation, it made a deep impact on the minds of all the listeners there. The reason for this, DVG goes into the backdrop of how Srinivasa Shastri developed this felicity of recitation. When he was a lecturer at the Hindu High School in Madras, V.S. Srinivasa Shastri and his friend D. Venkatramaya, who later rose to become the Deputy Director of Public Instruction, both of them had a training under Mark Hunter, who was a famous literary scholar, and he was a person who was very renowned for his aesthetic recitation, and he was well versed in enacting Shakespeare's plays. So Srinivasa Shastri Venkatramaya underwent training under this Mark Hunter for recitation. I've always felt for a teacher or for a lecturer, for a person who's teaching children, it is very important to learn the art of enunciation, pronunciation. In fact, it will be very useful if they also learn acting and dramatics, because at the end of the day, they are playing the part of a teacher. And it is not enough just if they know the subject, it also matters how they deliver the subject, the kind of words that are chosen, and the understanding of the level of the student. So a good teacher should be able to take the same subject and tailor make it to, let's say, a group of young children who are 12-year-old, and be able to teach the same subject to an 18-year-old group. And if it is a senior group who are in their bachelor's or the master's degree, he must be able to tailor it to their needs. If he truly knows the subject, he should be able to explain it to anybody. So that training of not just the subject knowledge, but also how to teach, is something which is very, very valuable. And I think especially if all the teachers engaged in dramatics and they learnt some of the plays and kavyas, committing it to memory, it will do them a very good thing when they teach and they try to connect with the students. When V.S. Srinivasa Shastri was, teaching in the Hindu High School, he was, I think, the head of that school. He did not accept any students as it is. So over and above the people who have cleared the public exam in the lower secondary, he would have a personal test. So he did not subscribe to the general standards. He had his own standards, and he had to ensure that they pass his special test if they had to be admitted inside. So, two students from the Andhra region had applied. One of them was Jnaapati Madhavarao, who later became the Diwan of Mysore. So, the two of them came and V.S. Srinivasa Shastri had this interview. So, what was the interview? Please construct a sentence with the phrase, had it not been thrown into it. And at once, one of the students said, had it not been for the fact that you are the headmaster here, we would not have been very particular to apply to this place for seats. So immediately Shastri said, yes, you have passed the test, and he calls his subordinate, Subramania Iyer. He says, please give them, they have earned their seats. It's not we are giving it, they have earned their place here. So he had his own personal standards. It's very important many times. It's so easy for us to say, oh, this person has won some Padma award, or this person has a PhD from this university, or he has gone to IIM, he has gone to IIT. These are very easy tags that we just take it for granted. Oh, if they have got this tag, then that must be they must be extraordinary. He never took any of these tags seriously. He has to personally examine before he passes a verdict. This requires for additional work and effort. Not everybody can do that. Another interesting thing was Shastri was a great advocate of peace, patience and humility. So many times his friends would ridicule him because he would say, you should not get angry. No anger, please. So you should accept things as they are and not get agitated by the situation. So many times they would make fun about this. One of them will say, what is this injustice, sir? The government seems to have forgotten the law. And another person will say, don't say this, sir. You are speaking with anger in your heart. Shastri ji has impressed upon the point that you should not get angry. You won't gain anything by anger. Then in a hotel or in a restaurant, somebody says, what is this? This is very spicy. It feels like we are swallowing fire. Who is this cook? Then immediately somebody will say, don't speak that way, sir. Shastri has advised us not to get angry. Then somebody is selling a vegetable and is charging a huge amount of money. What is this? You are charging so much of money, and the vegetable seller says, if you want, you buy, otherwise get lost. Then what is this? This is not right. Then he says, why are you getting so angry? Shastri has said it is not good to get angry. So this was the kind of response. More than anything, they were poking fun at him for his extreme view on patience and humility. Once what happened was Srinivasa Shastri was not well, and he was taking certain kind of Unani medicine, and that was supposed to be given by DVG himself. So every morning at 5 in the morning they'll cut a piece of lemon into two, and on both the sides they will sprinkle certain powder, and then that will be brought together and rubbed together and then juiced into a tumbler, and you put a spoonful of honey and mix it and all this thing. So this was a specific responsibility, and to give it. So every time Srinivasa Shastri will get very upset about this. See, because of me, you are getting up early. Otherwise, you would have nicely had a good sleep and woken up at whatever time. Because of me, you have to get up. All this kind of thing. And every time DVG will make some light joke and something. And fine, but at one point, Shastri was like, "This, I'm feeling really bad." Then DVG said, "Patience is something you used to advocate to us, is it not?" And then Shastri said, "You are lynching me with my own words. I have nothing to say." Similarly, another episode when they were traveling by train from Cochin back to Bangalore, one of in the compartments, there's one guy on the top compartment who just got up and he was sitting above Srinivasa Shastri, and by chance his leg happened to brush next to Shastri's head. And immediately DVG got angry and he said, "Hey, what are you doing? You are sitting on the other side. What are you doing? Take care of your leg." Then immediately Shastri held his shoulder and he said, "Just sit with your mouth shut." "What are you saying? This fellow he's so careless, he's so disrespectful." He says, No. Why do you want to pick up a fight for such a small issue? And DVG says, "Shastri strangely seemed to suspect that I am a very quarrelsome person. And whenever he wanted to give a piece of advice, he will start by saying, 'Sir.' And the moment he uses that word, 'Sir,' DVG will be very, very alert because he knows he's going to get shouted or he's going to get some very strong advice." So this was the sort of camaraderie that they both had. Similarly, once there was a casual gathering of some friends in Srinivasa Shastri's house, and he had invited a well-known doctor to speak about Shakespeare's works. Then the doctor was saying something about Shakespeare, and DVG felt that this is not right interpretation, and he made some corrections, and he said, this should be understood in a different manner. This is not right what you are saying. And then after that, the speaker left, and Srinivasa Shastri took DVG to task. Merely because you have read some bits and pieces of Shakespeare, you have developed so much of ego. What is the use of all your studies? This speaker who had come here is a very important person. He is a doctor. He has helped so many people, and even I depend on him for his expertise in medicine. And you are trying to show off your scholarship on Shakespeare and so on. Now, these are small episodes which may not seem so prominent for us today, but when we actually think about it, just see the kind of relationship that they had. That DVG was open to new ideas, that the fact that a person who is not a family member or some close relative, who is taking the liberty to give a mouthful, to give a nice shouting to somebody, that means there is so much of affection and feeling of ownership. Otherwise, why will if somebody on the street does something wrong, why will we go give them advice? They are nobody to us. The fact that we are caring to spend some time and correct somebody means that we really care about them. Whether it is a parent, whether it is a friend, whether it is a junior in the office or your employee, if you don't care about them, you will just say, let him do whatever the hell he wants, and you will keep quiet. The fact that Srinivasa Shastri is telling him this kind of thing, and we see multiple instances of that, tells you about both these characters. One is Srinivasa Shastri had so much of affection, and he did not want this to go unnoticed, and DVG was open-minded enough to accept this. Because if we tell somebody that you are making a mistake and that person defends himself, no, who are you to tell me? I know what is right. How can you tell this is actually correct what I have done? What you are telling is wrong. If somebody replies in this fashion, then nobody will, second time they won't make the mistake of correcting the mistake. It is only when the receiver is very open and says, you have opened my eyes, you told me in the right manner, I had been conceited, I was haughty, your words have opened my eyes, I will henceforth be careful. And not just saying it, but if they actually take that advice and change their behavior, then we know that our words have had some impact on them. We feel like telling again and again something if there is something wrong. Same thing whether it is in music or dance or writing or anything, when somebody comes to us with a request asking for a feedback, we only give feedback to people who will accept our feedback. Otherwise, we won't give feedback. We will just say, oh, it is fantastic, amazing, thank you, and we will go forward. We can see the nature of both the greats here. Once what happened was, Venkataranga Rao, a native of the Andhra region, who was a very close friend of Srinivasa Shastri, along with DVG, and three of them, they set out to Nandi Hills in a car. It was a kind of outing. There was a very interesting episode that happened during that trip. But before that, we will just see who is this Venkataranga Rao. He was a very erudite scholar and a nationalist. He was very much interested in the building of India, and he was very thorough in both Sanskrit and English. And few other people, the people in his league were like K. Sundaram Iyer, Professor Malur Rangacharya, and Vaidyanath Iyer, and K.B. Ramanath Iyer, who was the editor of the Educational Review, and Professor Lakshmi Narasu, a scholar of Buddhism. All these people, they used to discuss the prevailing system of education, how we can improve the country, what are the next steps that can be taken, and so on. The two subgroups in this team of people, DVG says, the first is called the rational group, he calls it. The group was for logical examination of things. They argued that society needs to be based on sound reasoning, no point in sticking to some age-old traditions and so on. The second group he calls the national group. The group argued that traditional methods must be employed in shaping the society, and regional and traditional approaches were not to be given up completely, and it is not pertinent only to take refuge in rationalism, blindly go for the rational. So these were the two groups. People like Sundaram Iyer and Rangacharya, Venkataranga Rao were in this second group, the national group. And also, Venkata Rao was a supervisor of the Landholders Association in Madras and so on, and very, very close personal friend of V.S. Srinivasa Shastri. As they were going towards Nandi Hills at that time, there was a discussion between them because Shastri was a member of what was called the Whitley Commission, and there was some discussion about the political scenario, and this commission was expected to create a good working environment for the laborers and to have a good relationship between employees, employers. So this kind of things were discussed from all angles and so on. And they were discussing about this Whitley Commission, and suddenly, a certain episode from the Ramayana was brought up, and whenever anything from Ramayana came up, Srinivasa Shastri would just go into like a trance and think about it and keep mulling over it. So then he just suddenly, that whole track changed from politics to completely to Ramayana, and he started reciting different instances of the same episode in Ramayana. We know that after Valmiki Ramayana, which is the foundation, so many poets were inspired by Valmiki and have retold Ramayana in their own creative ways, including Kalidasa. So taking from different episodes, the same episode from different perspective of different poets, he would recite something from Raghuvamsha, something from Kamba Ramayana, then something from the Janaki Paranaya, from Anargha Raghava, from Hanuman Nataka, all these different places, and he would explain this. So almost it became like a lecture on Ramayana for the two of them, like a private lecture with all the details and everything. Then he particularly explains this episode of Sri Ramachandra returning to Ayodhya with Sita and Lakshmana in the Pushpaka Vimana, and during the flight Rama explains all the places that they wandered about, and he points to Sita all these different places. And when they come to Dandakaranya, at that point of time, according to Bhavabhuti, Rama doesn't seem to recall the events, and he's not able to identify the place. Then he realizes, oh, it is only because of the mountains I am able to figure out what this place is, because the mountains are the only one which have remained same. Otherwise, the river's direction, as river is flowing in some other way, some other group of trees have come up, and the thick forest which was there in one place have now disappeared. This place which was empty earlier is now full of trees and plants. So lot of time has elapsed, and I'm not able to recognize, but because of the mountains, I am able to exactly identify the spot, because they have held that, their places very firmly. So then he spoke about what is the nature of this verse. He gives all the explanation, and he says why this is called Arthantaranyasa Alankara, where a specific case is given and some generalization is drawn and so on. And after all this thing, explaining completely about Ramayana and the different episodes, suddenly he goes back to the present context. He says, this is what today's India will need to keep in mind. A land that is full of opportunists and selfish men will never prosper. Water, forests and land may get displaced, but the mountains stand still and guide us. A country that has people who will stand as embodiments to a principle will thrive and will attain higher levels of prosperity. It is with this in mind that Valmiki has remarked, Dhairyena himavaniva. We must live for a principle, and he goes on, talking about all these different things. So these two people sitting in the car with Srinivasa Shastri had a grand feast of this lecture on Ramayana, on so many aspects through the course of their drive. Then 3 or 4 days after this incident, Venkata Rao and DVG picked up this issue with him. So Rao said, Shastri ji, what the hell are you doing? The explanation you gave us yesterday is so good. It has wasted on just 2 people. It should reach an assembly of 1,000 people. Our people should enjoy your scholarship, and they should enjoy the way you are explaining the poetry and literary aesthetics and so on. And then DVG immediately said, sir, very true. Just like Gilbert Murray has given the extensive commentary and critically analyzed Greek poetry, the occasion is now yours to do the same thing for the works of Indian poets. And the divine has ordained it upon you. DVG is giving all, hyperbole. Unless Indian poetry and plays are provided with such creative analysis, it will not win the attention of the global audience. And Shastri also, that was his nature. Although he was a politician or a statesman and a diplomat and all these things, at heart he was a lover of literature. He was a teacher. That was his core competence and core interest also. So that's why he says, all my energy and mental space are focused here. I really find happiness only in teaching literature, especially I am only interested in Sanskrit poetry. I would be so happy if I can be allowed to do only that. Who wants this Whitley Commission and all this unnecessary nonsense? I have had enough of politics. I will consider myself blessed if I am left alone to enjoy the company of the masters of the bygone era. So this was Srinivasa Shastri's mind. And lot of his friends used to keep telling him the same thing. Why are you wasting your time with this dry arena of politics? You should get into more of speaking about Sanskrit literature and poetry, and you must take up the task of analyzing the Ramayana. And every time he agreed with them, but he kept pushing pushing this forward, saying, actually, I have not read the Ramayana thoroughly. I have to, I'm not sure. I myself have to go through it once again properly. He kept saying this. But this was mostly an excuse because he was always reading Ramayana. Whenever he got a chance, he was reading Ramayana. And whenever he could find time together with his wife in the afternoon, he would ask her to read from Kamba Ramayana and make comparative notes and so on. They had a translation of the Valmiki Ramayana into Tamil by Srinivasa Iyengar. Then the Tamil version the Kamba Ramayana was there, and the original Valmiki Ramayana they used to have. And like this, they used to discuss. And they would examine how Kalidasa has explored this, how Bhavabhuti has explored this same topic, and so on. So it was a constant manana for him. It is not like, there is a lecture tomorrow, so today I will start reading something. For throughout his life, he has been reading Ramayana. It is such an integral part of his system. And finally, in 1944, when this episode happened, and then a couple of other people also started pushing him, like Venkatrama Shastri and so on, he agreed to give these lectures. It started in T.R. Venkatrama Shastri's house in a small way, and the people who started attending these lectures slowly kept increasing by the day, and news about the lecture series spread by word of mouth, and it used to be a packed house. And many times there were occasions where Shastri would completely go silent, voice choked with emotion, and everybody in the audience would be transported to the world of Ramayana for that period of time. That was the nature, that was the power of his oratory. Then there was a grand ceremony in the conclusion, and they gave him some gifts and everything with a beautiful verse which was etched in a silver plate and so on. Another episode. During, I think, 1935 to 1914, that period, Srinivasa Shastri was the Vice Chancellor of the Annamalai University in Chidambaram. So at that point of time, D.V. Gundappa was invited to speak about Gopalakrishna Gokhale. So his idea was to go there and spend a day and give the lecture and get back. But when Srinivasa Shastri learnt about this, he immediately wrote a letter to him and say, you are coming to Chidambaram and you are going to return without listening to a Tevaram. What kind of a fool are you? Just stay back for 2 more days. I will arrange for a Tevaram. So accordingly, a Tevaram concert was organized, Vice Chancellor has told. And Tevaram is basically an anthology of verses which is in praise of Shiva. And these are all composed by the Nayanmars or the Nayanars, who are Shaiva saints. And these are all in the traditional, older Tamil, which is like 8th century, 9th century, that period of time. So not only that he arranged for the concert, V.S. Srinivasa Shastri had asked the Tamil scholar Raghava Iyengar to be sitting next to DVG and explain the meaning of the Tevaram. So it's not just that they are singing Tevaram and you're listening to the music. He had an expert to sit next to DVG and explain the nuances. Now, DVG himself was knowing Tamil fairly well. It was his mother tongue, in fact. But even then, because it is older Tamil, there may be some nuances that is missed. So he ensured that there is somebody to explain. So the Tevarams are rendered by usually a group of people. So there are about 7 or 8 people and mridangam and thala and the raga patterns are something which has come down in a oral tradition for several years. And they are all the singers of Tevaram are all trained in a Gurukula system. So this, they have this they gave a beautiful concert, and then Shastri was explaining how the Nattukotai Chettiars, a particular merchant community of Tamil Nadu, they gave lot of support and patronage to the Tevaram community for the development of Tevaram, because they had made their money from their travels to Burma and Malaysia and other places. They also built many temples in all the places that they have been, and their patronage has nourished Tevaram to a great extent. And this concert went on for a couple of hours, and it was a great experience. So you see how much of effort, just because one person is coming, he has got together his entire thing just for the benefit of D.V. Gundappa. And the day after that, Shastri suddenly was unwell, and he had developed some sort of chest pain. And it was very difficult for him to speak for about 4 or 5 minutes, and he was laid down on a cot, and they were pressing his chest and rubbing his legs and hands and so on. DVG writes here a small segment which is very beautiful. He says, "I didn't know what I should do because I had not seen such ailment before." And by this time, DVG is probably in his 40s, because 1935 to 40, he must have been in his late 40s. So he says, "Both my parents had sturdy and healthy bodies, so I had not seen them suffering from any such ailment." So he didn't know what to do. He has never seen this kind of situation. So immediately, there are only 2-3 people there. Anusuyamma, who was the wife of Surya Narayana, who worked for Servants of India Society. Then there was Venkatraman, who was Srinivasa Shastri's secretary, private secretary, young boy of about 25 years, and D.V. Gundappa. Just that's it, nobody else. So then what to do? So immediately he told Venkatram to take the car and fetch the physician. Meanwhile, he asked Anusuyamma to play some of the songs on the gramophone, and DVG was rubbing his hands and his legs and just kind of ensuring that the blood circulation was going on. It would take about 15 to 20 minutes to go and fetch the doctor. So meanwhile, what to do? Now, DVJ had a knowledge of which are the kind of songs and ragas that Shastri liked. Now, this is also an indication of the intimacy. Now, how many of us know which is our friend's favorite ragas? Which are the kind of talas our friends like? Which are the singers? Not everybody, unless you know them very well, you will not know, oh, this person is a big fan of some Ghantasala or some Muhammad Rafi or M.S. Subbulakshmi. We won't, unless you know them very intimately, you will not know. And especially a detail like what kind of ragas a person enjoys, very rare that we know of, even of our own friends. But DVG had known. So he was suggesting to Anusuyamma which are the records to be played that Shastri will like. And for some time, Shastri was just lying motionless with no response, and one after the songs are coming. Then finally, after this thing, after a couple of songs, she played this song Pahi Ramachandra Raghava in the Yadukula Kamboji Raga, which was sung by Musiri Subramaniar in that record. It's a famous song. Then when the song was almost coming to an end, then in a very feeble voice, Srinivasa Shastri says, "Sir, can you please ask to play that song one more time?" So then once more, we played the whole song. Then he says, "Once more, sir, play the thing again." And then after 3 times listening to the same song, Shastri said, "If only I could listen to this song during my last moments, what else is required but for the, listening to the praise of Rama." And then DVG says, when Srinivasa Shastri actually passed away some years later in 1946, April 17, All India Radio Madras, after it announced the death of Srinivasa Shastri, they played Rara Ma Intikida in the Raga Asaveri. And DVG could not control his tears because it is such a fitting tribute to Shastri that when his news of his death is announced, a favorite composition of his, which is in praise of Rama, was played. there's so many episodes. It's so tempting to go into all the details, but given the time and the length of what is there here, I have to take certain choices and ignore. I hope you will read these works in the original whenever you get a chance, because they can be read anytime, starting from any page. And to make it even easier, DVG has given subheadings everywhere, so you can literally start reading from any page in these volumes. It appears that V.S. Srinivasa Shastri was very influenced by this scientist and thinker called Thomas Henry Huxley. And based on his writings, Srinivasa Shastri's thought process was refined and cultured. And this is what he has told DVG. However, DVG's independent analysis of Shastri is that he was inspired by two major sources. One was the Mahakavyas, and the other was his daily interaction with the world. And Srinivasa Shastri's heart was naturally inclined towards classical poetry. And he had completely lost his heart to the great poets like Vyasa, Valmiki, Kalidasa, Bhartrhari. And his mental landscape was, cultured and sculpted by these giants. And the other was, he has traveled so widely. He had visited so many countries like UK and Canada and New Zealand and South Africa, almost such a wide array of travel. And he used to interact with all the locals there. He used to discuss with the people about the political situation, about their difficulties, what kind of changes that they are bringing about in their governance. He used to meet the common people and the leaders of those countries. And so look at the range of experience that a person like that would have gathered. So all these things would have influenced his thought, not just Huxley. This is what DVG says. One evening, 3-4 friends, as usual, they were walking down to the Minto Eye Hospital with Shastri. They wanted to meet B.K. Narayan Rao. And as they were walking down, by chance, Shastri happened to look at the sky. And suddenly, he saw the rising moon in the east and the setting sun in the west at the same time. This happens some days of the year. So he saw this at once and he's like, oh my God, this is so special. And immediately Narayan Rao he happened to come out of the hospital at the same time. He says, sir, what are you standing here on the ground? Come, I will take you to the top of my hospital. You will get a fantastic view. And slowly they took, Shastri was already old probably by the time, so slowly he took him up the stairs. And, when they saw that beautiful sight, he says, DVG says, the beauty of the evening could be perceived there even better from that particular spot, and Shastri was thrilled. And then he narrated an episode to those friends about his trip to South Africa. And when Shastri had gone to South Africa, the local people had requested him to give a lecture about India, about our country. So he spoke for about half an hour and covered a variety of topics. And then he quoted this following verse from Shakuntala as part of the lecture. And I'll just tell you the meaning of the verse. The moon sets behind the mountain on one side, and on the other side the sun rises with his tender rays of the morning. When the two light-emitting bodies that govern the world have their ups and their downs, what can be said about commoners like us? So, just as the sun and the moon brighten the world, at the same time our intellect should be blended with affection for all beings. Only when two work together will there be peace and happiness in our lives. So, when Shastri said this, the audience were wonderstruck and they gave a standing ovation and applause which went on for minutes. And Shastri said, these people do not have the good fortune of witnessing these kind of things. And they were amazed at the way in which Indians look at things and the subtle and, the soft, tender emotions that are present in the Indian literature. When it came to traditional scholarship, Srinivasa Shastri definitely had great regard for tradition. In fact, like I told you, his father was a raconteur, a Pauranika. But some of the people in his close circles, they had a kind of a feeling that Shastri had some disdain for traditional scholars. And once he spoke in the Kannada Sahitya Parishad, he gave a lecture, and for some reason he was very annoyed with traditional scholars, and he said, these traditional scholars are stuck in the old age. There is so much of new science and technology that is coming, and people have developed so much of modern knowledge, and these people are stuck with all the old, thoughts and traditional things. So, what are the difficulties the world is facing? What are the current requirements of the people? Where is the world heading? If the scholars don't understand this, then what is the use of this kind of scholarship? The traditional scholars must have a broad-minded approach in understanding the world and everything. So he was a little forceful in his talk. And then immediately after, a lot of people were very upset by the talk and said, how can he say this about the traditional scholars? And they were, and also what happens is a very well-known person is saying something, so they cannot voice their anger also directly. So they are talking in hushed tones and criticizing Shastri and saying, what is this fellow saying? Then after this lecture, it was just DVG and Srinivasa Shastri together. DVG writes, I gave some feedback to him about his lecture in a subtle manner. So he gave the feedback, but in a subtle manner. So I told him that, some people are hurt. And Shastri's reply was partly justification and partly repentance. Then he said, should we not point out the deficiencies which are so obvious in front of our eyes? Should we just keep quiet? If I, just have a nice and artificial smile on our faces, should we not be honest? And he says, I did not realize that my outpouring would cause hurt to other people. If somebody has got hurt, I am very, very sorry for it. I repent. And then he goes to D. Venkatramaya, who had organized this lecture. He says, I am very sorry for what has happened. I did not intend to, cause any displeasure to people. And if somebody is, affected by it, I am very sorry for it. So that was his nature. And following day, he writes about this in the Vaidika Dharma Sampradayasturu as well, this episode. They had gathered in D. Venkatramaya's house, and there was some, for a wedding or something like that. And after a lunch, they were all having tambula, and somebody wanted to just, flatter Srinivasa Shastri and pump him up and say, sir, yesterday your lecture was fantastic. All these, Purohitas and scholars are useless fellows. He started speaking ill of all these traditional scholars. They don't even know the meaning. They just keep chanting these mantras and that and this. So he wanted to curry favor with Srinivasa Shastri. But Shastri could not tolerate this. He got really agitated. He said, sir, how much do you pay your barber every time? Quarter of a rupee. You pay the same thing to your Purohita, quarter of a rupee. You don't expect any great scholarship from the barber. Why are you expecting from this Purohita? He's also, leading thing, he's doing whatever it is for his livelihood. And if you are so dedicated to the tradition, you tell me how many hours in a week you are spending in doing Veda Dhyayana, how much time you are spending in learning all the mantra, the meaning of the mantras, how much time do you contemplate on our faith and our traditions. So then this fellow became silent. It shows that Srinivasa Shastri was an honest person who was putting forth his views and very much aligned to the tradition, at the same time not blindly following something, also having an open mind. More than all these aspects of Shastra, the real personality of Srinivasa Shastri could be described, DVG says, in one word, which is Sahridayata, the heart of a connoisseur, the connoisseurship. In the Indian aesthetic terminology in classical literature, Sahridaya is someone who can understand and appreciate all the nuances of a certain art, whether it's literature, whether it's music, dance, painting, whatever it is. And he or she can grasp the essence of rasa. He knows what is rasa, what is dhvani, what is the best we can get from a work of art. Sahridaya knows. So a person who understands the subtleties, person who comprehends human nature and who brings it into his own direct experience is a Sahridaya or a Hridayavanta. DVG then says, among the people who have gained reputation in the world, there are two categories. One is the intellectuals and one is the group of people who are very rich at heart. It is very rare to see people who have both. And from this perspective, DVG says, I feel that Shastri belonged to the category of men with a rich heart. There is a very interesting episode of Srinivasa Shastri wanting to come and stay in Bangalore for a few months. And obviously, every time it's not possible to stay in the same place if you are coming for 1 or 2 months. Every once in 2 years, you have to find a place. In the case of people like Shivaswami Iyer, he used to come very regularly, I think once a year for 2-3 months. So I think he was more or less staying in a similar place. But with Srinivasa Shastri, once he was trying to find out a place to stay for a few months, especially because he was not well, he wanted to recover. He writes to DVG, please find me a place which I can rent, I want to stay. Then in his typical meticulous nature, DVG went around and made a list of places and identified 1 or 2 places. And there's one particular place, he says, I have identified. The house is very close to Lal Bagh. And the friends, your friends like BK Narayan Rao, SG Shastri, they are all very close to this house which is identified. It has very spacious rooms. There's a large living room. You can sit and work. It has a fully functioning kitchen and a deep well within the compound which has clean water. And a little away from the main house, there is an outhouse. Building is strong and clean. There's a portico in front of the house. It is nice to have friendly meetups in portico in the evening. All the details, he says. Then he says, but we have to keep in mind certain circumstances. The person who built this house is a friend of mine. A couple of weeks after he performed the Griha Pravesha, my friend who went to fetch water from the well slipped and fell into the well, lost his life. This is to his misfortune, he died. And people now say that the house is ill-fated and nobody is coming to take, take this place as a tenant. Another thing is that this friend who passed away, he was an engineer, he came from a good family, and he had taken a big loan to construct this house. Now his family is struggling. The house has been put under mortgage in some cooperative bank, and the only way for the family to repay the loan is from the money, the tenant, whatever the rent is given to this family. The rent is 60 rupees, half of which goes to repaying of the loan. We can give the rest of it for the family maintenance. Now, if you are interested in this house, I can meet our director, I can speak to him, and he can probably bring down the rent a little bit, because nobody is taking it, we can bargain and bring down the rent. Then immediately Shastri writes a reply, and this is what his letter said. Sir, your letter has put me into some embarrassment. You want to know my opinion? Don't you know my heart? You say that the family is in a difficult state. Don't you think it is our duty to help them however much we can? You have told me in your letter that the house itself is considered to be ill-fated. I am terribly sick, and if I stay there and I am alive in that house, then whatever ill fame that the house has got, it will go away in no time. And in case for whatever reason I breathe my last there, then the house will not get some special bad name. Already it has a bad name. It cannot get worse. So therefore, I suggest you go ahead with that particular house, and you definitely don't have to meet any director or request them for any reduction in the rent. We will pay the full rent, because if they bring down the rent, the proportion that the family gets will also reduce. And if the rent is brought down once, all the future tenants will ask for this low rent. We cannot do that. They should not at any cost decrease the rent for my sake. And let the house owners stay there itself. You say it's a big house. Why should they go and stay somewhere else? Let them stay in the same place. And you have mentioned to me that they are from a very good family and they have Vaidikas and everything. So the company of such people is very noble, and it will be very beneficial for us. So you see the kind of magnanimity and this thing of Srinivasa Shastri. The personal bonding that he had with DVG, and also the real care, the humanity that he had for these people. Now today we may think it is, yes, we also may have done if we were in such a situation and so forth. But we must remember that Srinivasa Shastri was not some very well-to-do person with lot of money and things like that. Even under these circumstances, it was very important for him to, as much as possible, help people. So finally, this house was finalized, and every evening, as usual, Srinivasa Shastri's friends would come, and people like Narayan Rao, M.S. Ramchandra Rao, N.N. Iyengar was a great engineer, S.G. Shastri, Professor M.A. Sampath Kumaran, who was a botany professor. All these people used to come, and then also D. Venkatramaya, lots of people. Even people like Mirza Ismail and S.P. Rajagopalacharya, they used to visit regularly. DVG then writes about the kind of magnanimity of Srinivasa Shastri. He never had any jealousy or envy for people who were doing well. In fact, he greatly, enjoyed the success of other people. Now, not everybody can do that. It's especially people in public office. They are always trying to take care of their own interests, their own position, their, whatever little they do, they want to showcase that. And they're not interested in celebrating other people's success. When Radhakrishnan was honored by Oxford University and came to India, Shastri wanted to organize a get-together to welcome back and congratulate him. There are so many people who were gathered for the celebration, and Shastri was thrilled that a person of our country has been given such a high honor in England, and he spoke very glowingly about Radhakrishnan. Yet another episode. This is a non-political issue, right? This is just a general. Even in the political arena, we could see this kind of anasuyata in V.S. Srinivasa Shastri. In 1931, there is a famous roundtable conference in London, and this involved a lot of parties, and there was a discussion about who should be all the Indian representatives to attend this conference. Lot of the people who were selected representatives said that Srinivasa Shastri should lead that conference. And they all went and they told him, "Sir, you should lead the conference." Immediately he said, "I don't deserve to have the honor that all of you want me to bear. Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru should be our leader. Let us visit him and request him to lead us." Immediately they because Srinivasa Shastri was a very thorough gentleman, very nice person. And Tej Bahadur Sapru was a very short-tempered person. So naturally, people like to work with friendly and amicable leaders, not with hot-headed persons. So the representative said, "Sir, you are more suitable for this position because he is known to be short-tempered and egoistic." Shastri immediately tells them, "Please tell me what is more important for you at this juncture. Is it to ensure that our endeavor goes on smoothly or to harp on individual differences and things like that?" Just think about what I'm trying to say. He is the primary person on the side, he explains, Shastri explains, the primary person on the side of the British government is Lord Reading, and his word has lot of weightage. And he was one of the earlier viceroys of India, and he was a famous lawyer and Chief Justice, Lord Chief Justice of England and so on. When he was the viceroy of India, Tej Bahadur Sapru was the law minister in his cabinet. So therefore, Lord Reading is very much aware of Sapru's expertise in law and his scholarship. He has great regard for him and he knows him well. So therefore, if Sapru says something, that will have much more weightage, because he was part of the Viceroy's Council and so on. So would you want to give me preference because I am a nice guy, or would you want a well-qualified person? So therefore, we will go and ask him. He may be a short-tempered person, but what is important for us is our work should get done. Let us go and convince him. He is our leader. Where will you find people like this today? It is almost impossible, because everybody is taking care of their interests, whereas Srinivasa Shastri, people like DVG, all, they had an interest of the nation. They had bigger interests. So they were willing to sacrifice their own personal interest for the sake of the larger benefit. DVG says, Shastri displayed great excitement when anyone did anything that he deemed worthwhile. The person's age and qualification never mattered. DVG himself, once there was an article that he wrote called A Dubious Experiment. It was written about Dr. Brajendranath Seal, who was then the Vice Chancellor of Mysore University. He was made an extraordinary member in the Council of Ministers. And DVG had argued that this set of events was unwarranted, and he had written a sharp article in the Hindu newspaper. It was published on Madras. today Chennai, those days it was called Madras. And on the day the article was published, Srinivasa Shastri happened to be in Mysore. He did not know that this article was published, probably nobody told him. And it was only in the afternoon that day, when Srinivasa Shastri was in Mysore, he happened to see this article and he said, "Oh, I have to go to Bangalore now." And it's not like there was Bangalore-Mysore highway those days, which will reach in 1.5 hours. It would take at least for 3-4 hours to reach Bangalore. So you cannot go to Bangalore on whim. And his friends were like, why you don't want to go to Bangalore? What is the hurry? I need to meet that fellow this evening. I would like to congratulate him. So he wanted to undertake a journey from Mysore to Bangalore just to congratulate DVG, who is some 18-20 years his junior, who is almost like his Shishya. So he is so eager to express appreciation for anything good that has happened. And immediately he came, and as soon as he saw DVG in the railway station, he had such affection and appreciation for his work. Similarly, he had great regard for other scholars like M. Venkata-krishnaiah. Every time he visited Mysore, he would go and visit the grand old man of Mysore Tataya, M. Venkata-krishnaiah. We will, come to his episode also in this book. And similarly, every time he would like to visit Professor M. Hiriyanna's house. And he had great regard for Hiriyanna, his scholarship, his ethical outlook, and he used to always praise Hiriyanna. When they went to meet Professor M. Hiriyanna, D.V. Gundappa and Shastri, Srinivasa Shastri was made to sit on the only chair in Hiriyanna's house. And Hiriyanna sat down on the floor on a mat. Srinivasa Shastri could not tolerate this. He immediately stood up and he said, "Sir, I prefer to stand because I can not sit on the floor. I find it very difficult to sit on the floor, so I will stand." And finally, a via media solution was figured out, and Hiriyanna sat on a bench. But he had only one chair in his house, which was for the important guest. Everybody else sat on the floor. Then again, during that discussion, Srinivasa Shastri picked up a topic that is close to his heart. I told you earlier that he was not having a great opinion of traditional scholars, and Hiriyanna being thoroughly trained in the traditional way, Srinivasa Shastri asked him, Hiriyanna, with the scholars like you around, is it necessary to train scholars in the old traditional manner? What is the state of the scholars who get trained in English in our universities along with Sanskrit? And Hiriyanna, with a smile on his face, he said, the scholarship that is churned out of our universities today is feeble and decrepit. If traditional scholarship is nurtured alongside, it will certainly benefit the society. And what Hiriyanna said 75 years ago holds true even more today. He says, yesteryear's scholarship does not exist today, and to expect profundity from meager study at the university is impractical. The knowledge of our ancient people was precise and deep. We should try to protect such scholarship today. This, even today, if somebody puts this in a small box and put it as a WhatsApp status, it will be as if we are saying for this generation. Even now, it is so true. And traditional scholarship involved so much of rigor and so much of focus. It had its drawbacks, no doubt. But today's scholarship and the kind of diluted things that are taught in the universities are no match to the manner in which things were studied in the olden days. It was the opinion of Srinivasa Shastri, and in fact even the opinion of Hiriyanna, that there is no harm in picking up the best from the Western education. Learning English or becoming familiar with the latest advancements in technology is always very good, but it should not be at the cost of us losing out our roots. It should not be at the cost of sacrificing traditional scholarship. It should be over and above traditional scholarship that English learning or updation of knowledge should happen. When Srinivasa Shastri was in Bangalore recovering from his illness, there was a small discussion that happened about the kind of costs that were incurred. I told you Srinivasa Shastri was not very wealthy. Then Shastri narrated an incident that happened to him when he was standing on the platform in the Pune railway station. He was catching a train to Bangalore. well-dressed person, very important-looking person came up to him and he said, "You are V.S. Srinivasa Shastri. I read in the papers that you are not keeping well. The doctor has apparently advised you to take rest in Bangalore. I think it is your duty from the national perspective to go to Bangalore and spend some time and have a few stress-free days there. And it is also the duty of those who are well and people who have the money to ensure that you get all the comforts you need. So I am just wanting to get your approval so that I can send little bit of money, 5,000 rupees in those days." He said, "I will send you 5,000 rupees in, I will deposit in your name at the bank. Please accept this money, spend it the way you like, and just when that money is spent, just inform me. I will replace that. I will continue to put that money. I will refill the amount. My only desire is that you regain your wealth and regain your health and come back to normal, to active duty in working for the nation." And without any extra moment, this person says, "I will expect this approval from you," and he just goes away. He doesn't even wait for, "Oh, thank you, how nice of you, you are doing all this." Nothing. He doesn't want to listen to anything. He just says, "Sir, I'm sending 5,000 rupees, please accept it. If you want more, just send me a note, I will refill that amount. Thank you." And that's it, he is gone. And when asked his name, he said it's not a big deal at all, and he says he's a Parsi gentleman, that's all. He doesn't know any of the other details. There are a lot of expenses, travel and medicine and all the food items, and he was prescribed a specific fruit diet, so buying fresh fruits, all these things are expensive. Even today, right? It's all expensive. If you want to eat junk food, it's very cheap. If you want to eat healthy food, it is expensive. It is not easy to get healthy food at a low cost. So all these expenses were there, and Shastri narrated the above incident. The DVG adds, he says, "I cannot say that Shastri spent all the money donated by the generous Parsi. It is my calculated guess that he donated the entire amount or probably large parts of it to the treasury of Servants of India Society. This was his nature. He hardly used the income that he earned as an agent of the Indian government. He gave away large parts of it to the society, Servants of India Society. Some 35,000 rupees of those days, whatever he had gained, he gave away." And after all, DVG is his Shishya. Similarly, when the public of Bangalore came together and gave DVG a purse of 1 lakh rupees in those days, without even, it has not even come into his hand. He already has donated that entire amount to Gokhale Institute. And never in his life DVG was in a position of affluence. He was always in a very, very difficult stage, but never he has accepted any extra money. He has always, whatever extra thing, donated to Gokhale Institute, donated to something or other. And Shastri was his guru, and naturally Shastri also was like that. Similarly, he talks about an episode where they had gone to Canada, Australia and other places, and one of his private secretary, Girija Shankar Bajpai, an ICS officer, so he was a well-known person. So he went to during the visit to Canada, he went and bought a pocket watch with a chain and a walking stick and a pocket box and all these things. And Shastri was very upset. He said, "Why do you want to waste public money to buy all these kind of things, that pocket clock and this thing which is costing some $300 and $400 and all these things. Please give all that back. The money can be put to some other use. It belongs to our country." And only the small pocket box to keep the visiting card he accepted as a small token. The Servants of India Society had a English weekly called Servants of India. That was the name of the magazine. Now, this was always lacking in funds, and somehow this magazine was running and it was just surviving. So therefore, DVG made some suggestions on a sheet of paper and included this with a letter to Srinivasa Shastri. So what are his suggestions? We must have advertisements in the magazine. Those who bring advertisements should be generously remunerated. We must also identify big agents in different cities so they can increase the circulation of the magazine. We must identify hawkers in bus stands and railway stations of big cities like Bombay, Madras, Calcutta, and Bangalore, where they can call out loud and sell these magazines. Then we must have more pictures, and we must have large posters with bold letters stuck on the walls at different places for advertising, and so on. And this big list. Then Shastri wrote a reply, almost in a tone of ridicule. You are thinking about sales and wasting your breath about it. Why do we need to worry about marketing? It is not our duty. It is only our duty to write, and we must do so with the best of capabilities. If the fools don't buy, the greater fools they. This is what he says. Now, similarly, what happened in 1923-24, DVG had started a monthly magazine called Indian Review of Reviews. And he had managed to publish about 3 or 4 issues. And G.A. Natation, who was the editor of the Indian Review, was staying in Shastri's house as a guest at that time in Bangalore. And Natation and Shastri were very good friends. And DVG one morning was sitting in the living room of Srinivasa Shastri's house and proofreading the manuscript of the Kamala lectures, which we will come to a little later. So he was invited to give a series of lectures called the Kamala lectures in the University of Calcutta. So that manuscript of that lecture he was proofreading, DVG. The Natation who was staying with him came to Gundappa and he said, "You are an intelligent guy, you seem to be very hardworking also. But I think you are not very good in managing money. See, if you don't bring advertisements in your magazine will drown eventually." And then he sits with D.V. Gundappa and explains how to get advertisements, the manner in which you can make it attractive, and what kind of paper it must be used in the different parts of the magazine. Same paper cannot be used everywhere. Some places you must have glossy paper, some places you must have normal paper. All this thing he is explaining. Then Shastri was listening to this conversation from the other end of the room, and he had a little bit of displeasure on his face, and he comes to them and he says, "Hey, Natesha, why are you telling him all this? You will not abandon your methods and he will not learn these methods. He is like our Venkata Rangarao. He believes that success in business is a sin. This is his fate. Let him experience it." So, DVG was giving all this advice, but he never followed it for his own magazines and papers. He was of the opinion of Srinivasa Shastri, but he had great interest that the Servants of India magazine should do well. Speaking about magazines, there was an idea that DVG had at the end of the Second World War. There was a lot of churning happening around the world. There were world leaders like Churchill and Roosevelt came up with this Atlantic Charter. The United Nations was formed. At this point of time, DVG was very enthusiastic with the developments, and he says, should we not do something for the cause? I should, there are so many questions that will arise with these kind of establishments coming into the picture. We have to, analyze this thing. We should share these things with the world and all this thing. So he wanted to start a magazine for this. And he wrote a letter to Rajagopalachari. He had a detailed note saying, this is the intention and I want your advice. Please tell me, this is going to be a fantastic idea. There's all this, DVG will have said all this in great detail. And the reply was just 2 sentences from Rajaji. Don't. You have burnt your fingers enough. That's all. Just 2. One is a word and one is a sentence. I don't know what divine ordinance led me to act as per his advice. It is only because of that I am alive today to write the present essay. Which means that if he had started the magazine, he would have gone broke. He would not have had money to feed himself. So Rajaji's advice came at a very pertinent time, and by some divine ordinance, DVG also agreed, because many times he has ignored the advice of these people. Here he has chosen to take the advice, and it was something that saved him. So in 1926, Srinivasa Shastri received an invitation from the Maharaja College in Ernakulam in the Cochin province, and he was supposed to deliver a few lecture that would be on any topic that he liked that would be of practical relevance. At that point of time, Srinivasa Shastri asked Gundappa, "So what was your reply to this?" Then DVG said, "It is something you should definitely accept because this will be a good opportunity for bringing awareness about the princely states in the people." So DVG was very much for the princely states, and he said this is a great opportunity and you should definitely accept this lecture. So there was some discussion about this, and finally Srinivasa Shastri agreed to this. Now, until that point of time, all the politicians who belonged to British India, that means the different presidencies. So Mysore was a princely state, Baroda was a princely state, but there was the Mysore, the Madras presidency, the Bombay presidency, and so on, right? So the people who belonged to the British India, the politicians, they never interfered in the princely states. They were of the opinion that the administration of such princely states were not within their purview. Now, Shastri belonged to Gokhale Servant of India Society, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale was also of this opinion that the society should not interfere in matters of princely states. We have nothing to do with this. And this is also the time when Srinivasa Shastri had come to Bangalore and Anand Rao had banned it, and he was not allowed to speak. Because at that point of time, Gokhale was very, very clear that the society should not interfere in the princely states. We are different. We will not talk about this. So now DVG was trying to convince Srinivasa Shastri. DVG is like his Shishya. Gokhale is his Guru. Guru is saying don't go. And this Shishya is trying to give arguments to say why it is important. So Shastri is naturally in a dilemma. And there was a discussion after which he agreed. And what was the argument put forth by DVG is very valuable for us to see. He says, if we have to sort out our problems with British India, we must resolve several other issues connected with the entire nation. As long as the issue persists, the purpose of British India will not be served. The prevalent circumstances in the entire nation is now tricky because of the princely states. If you want to gain freedom from British India, you will need to solve the problems connected with the princely states. If you don't put your hands in this matter, there is nobody else who will take it up. Moreover, the importance this topic will receive when it is taken up by you cannot be obtained if anyone else does it. So even from the perspective of British India, your thoughts on the princely states are essential. At this point of time, DVG was just 29 years old. And Srinivasa Shastri, who is 18 years his senior, accepted his argument and said, well, we will, he was not 29, he was 39, but from the age of 29, DVG has been actively thinking about the princely states. So he was in 26, he would have been, 39 years or 40 years, close to 40 years. Then Shastri delivered, 3 or 4 lectures in Ernakulam. The manner in which Shastri prepared and presented these lectures were very noteworthy, DVG says. The geography of the states, the different princely states, the royal lineages, the history about the birth of these provinces, the agreements and differences that the princely states had with the British, the alliance amongst themselves, the kind of growth that were there, the kind of intrigue that was done by the residents, the activities carried out behind the scenes, the troubles that the common man faced in these intrigues, all these things one by one Shastri picked them up and discussed in detail. And the manner in which he presented the subject, and the kind of introspection that resulted from it was very, very remarkable. And Srinivasa Shastri was the first among those employed by the British who gave utmost importance to the condition of the princely states. Then later on, in the same year, Calcutta University invited him to speak as part of the Kamala lectures. Now, the Kamala in Kamala lectures is named after, is a name of the deceased daughter of Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, who was the Vice Chancellor of the university. His daughter died at a young age, and to keep her memory alive, he had instituted an endowment fund, and the Kamala lectures would be organized every year at the Calcutta University. One of the conditions of the Kamala lectures was that the same lecture that was delivered in Calcutta as part of the Kamala lectures should be delivered in another university in India, so that people elsewhere also get the benefit of the wisdom. Because it's unlike today, where it's so easy, wherever in the world, even if somebody gives a lecture in space, you can sit here and watch it on YouTube. Those days it was not so straightforward. So it was a part of the requirement that within a particular period of time, the same series of lectures should be delivered in another university. So the topic that he had chosen was rights and duties of the Indian citizen. And in February 1926, he delivered this in Calcutta. And as per the requirements, he was slated to deliver these lectures in March 1926 in Madras. Now what happened was, at that point of time, after he finished, he gave a wonderful series of lectures in Calcutta. It was very well accepted. And he was slated to give the same lecture in Madras. So a lot of people had come from all over to Madras to listen to him, because it was a great event. At that point of time, when it was, in the old assembly hall of the assembly hall of the old Christian college, the lectures were organized. And that time Shastri had a bout of fever, and he was, just a few days before that, he was just bedridden, and friends and relatives who came to learn about this, said, please postpone the lectures. Why are you, putting yourself through this? The Vice Chancellor of Madras University went to Shastri's house and said, sir, please, it's absolutely fine. We will push it by, a month or two. It's not at all a problem. So he's supposed to give this as part of a requirement, and the Vice Chancellor is requesting him. And Shastri said no. And finally, an elderly gentleman by the name S. Krishnaswamy Iyer came to meet him. And this is what happened there. So Krishnaswamy Iyer was a very good friend of Venkatramakrishnaswamy Iyer, who was a renowned lawyer. And this Krishnaswamy Iyer was he worked as a superintendent. He was a superintendent of police in the police department, and he was very close to Srinivasa Shastri. And he was older to Srinivasa Shastri, and there was a lot of respect that Shastri had for this Krishnaswamy Iyer. So then he came and sat next to Srinivasa Shastri on his bed, and he was really very, very sick at that time. So he says, Srinivasa, and immediately Shastri opened his eyes, Ayerwal, and he tried to sit up. Iyer said, please sit down. And he says, Srinivasa, tell me, who are the people who are alive today who can call you in Ekavachana? In Kannada and Tamil we have Ekavachana, Nino. Who can say Nino? So Shastri said, well, my elder sister was there who would use Ekavachana with me, and now you are Neevidira, Neev bitre bere yarilla. After she has passed away, who else is there who can call me with a familiar singular? Because everybody will be a famous person, they will always say Neevo. You are the only person who can say Nino. So if that is the case, should you not be listening to elders, what the elders say? So he says, yes, sir, tell me anything except changing the dates of the Kamala lectures. Anything you tell, I will do it. So he said, you have no strength. How are you going to do this? He says, no. The lecture is pressing upon me. If I get the weight of the lectures off my head, then I will immediately recover. Whereas if I postpone the date, then I will continue to be unwell. Hundreds of people have come from all over the place to listen to the lecture. If they stay back in Madras, even for a day extra, how much of money they will incur, what are the expenses they will have, it will be so much of a hassle for everybody just because of one person. This is what is really bothering me. I want your blessings. Let the lectures go well. I am sure the divine will be with me. So then, obviously, as failed, Krishnaswamy Iyer says, okay, that's fine. But I will be at your side throughout the lecture. I will give you a tablet and a kashaya every half an hour. You should take it. Everything will be fine. And then he applied some vibhuti on him and said some mantra and said, next, when the lecture started, he had an Ayurveda doctor full time next to Srinivasa Shastri to ensure that there is no problem. On the whole day he was there, and also the following day, and appropriate hours there were medication given to him, and the lectures went off very well. It was a roaring success and everybody was satisfied. Look at the kind of dedication that he is already well-known person. He has he doesn't have to do this. He can always postpone it by a day or by a week or by a month. And the Vice Chancellor of the university has requested him. Even then, he doesn't want to put the common person in trouble who has taken so much of pains to come to Chennai or to Madras just to listen to him speak. Then there was a time during 1924-25 when Srinivasa Shastri wanted to write a biography of Gokhale. Unfortunately, that did not happen due to certain circumstances. However, it is very interesting to read about the manner in which Shastri went about in collecting the data along with DVG to prepare this biography. So he put together the original copies of several letters that Gokhale had written to important people, and the several letters he had received from various important places and people. Then newspaper discussions that had taken place on various political questions, the documents related to the older contemporaries of Gokhale, the teachers of those people who were the people who were for him, who were against him. Like this, all the possible material he had collected, he brought it to Bangalore. And DVG was supposed to help him out. He went through all these letters and documents, arranged them according to theme, did so much of study, and every letter they would write down the summary in a couple of sentences and prepared a docket. And in this manner, they had done some amount of groundwork. So there were letters that Vishweshwara had written to Gokhale, and the correspondence with Dinshaw Vacha, with K.G. Gupta of Bengal, and with Sir William Wedderburn, Sir Henry Cotton. All these people, Gokhale had contact with all of them. So everything was collected, and unfortunately there was a fire accident where all these documents were collected in Pune, and this whole plan went out of, it could not be fulfilled. Even so, in 1935, that means almost 10 years later, Shastri delivered a few lectures in the Mysore University campus entirely based on whatever he had retained in memory from that work done 10 years back. And later he gave a talk in the intermediate college in Bangalore as well. What is remarkable is Srinivasa Shastri's multifaceted personality. So one is, he was a teacher, a pioneer in education, a literator, a scholar, a political genius, a statesman, and a great orator. Although he was a great orator, he was very careful in his speech. When he was in a small gathering of friends or even in a medium-sized gathering, he would never try to draw attention to himself. When somebody spoke to him, he would respond. Whenever he spoke in a measured way with meaningful words. He was never for empty talk. And he was such a remarkable personality when he came on stage. DVG writes, there are 3 people who are known for their English oratory skills in India. Surendranath Banerjee of Bengal, Annie Besant of the Theosophical Society, and V.S. Srinivasa Shastri. DVG goes on to analyze the 3 great speakers. Surendranath Banerjee had a loud voice and uninterrupted flow of words and a lot of force in his speech. Annie Besant's style was more like the wavy nature of a river going up and coming down, and her sentence construction was serious and profound. Srinivasa Shastri, along with the flow of words, there was a certain kind of beauty embedded. And it was he says it's very difficult to actually explain how can you describe a rainbow or a beautiful vision using words. You can only try to do that. Srinivasa Shastri used to do a lot of mental preparation before giving a speech. It was very important for him to think deeply about what he's going to speak about. And he spoke on all topics, ad hoc. Like he would not have specifically made notes or something. So it would be extempore, but there is a lot of mental preparation. Even when he gave these lectures in Ernakulam, he did not even carry a piece of paper. He had made notes, he had contemplated, but he just spoke about it offhand. It is only for the Kamala lectures where he actually went into a very, very serious study of the topic, because it had to be delivered in Calcutta and then later in Madras, and it was a very prestigious thing, and because it was a topic that he required a lot of additional details and bolstering it with references and so forth. So he read through several books of political science, history of nations, law and jurisprudence and so on. And the Advocate General T.R. Venkatrama Shastri, who was his very good friend, he actually had for a law graduate in his office to explain to Srinivasa Shastri all the finer points of law. And his study of this subject went on for a whole year before he gave the Kamala lectures. This was a sort of preparation that he did. Once DVG also refers to a lecture of Srinivasa Shastri for the unveiling of the statue of Edwin Montagu in Bombay, because he knew Edwin Montagu very well, and he was invited to speak about this British statesman. He writes, once he accepts that he's going to speak about this topic, he writes a letter to a few of his friends. He says, I have agreed to inaugurate Montagu's statue. I have to deliver a speech on the occasion. I need your help and your counsel regarding what should be spoken and what should not be spoken on the occasion. And DVG was one of the people that he had written this letter to. Immediately DVG write back, should I give you a suggestion about this? You are such a good friend of Montagu and so on, and left it at that. But Srinivasa Shastri did not stop there. He replied back, I have not written this letter merely as a gesture of courtesy. I really would like to know the topic in entirety and contemplate upon it. So I am seriously asking you, please tell me what are the things I should be mentioning. So then DVG mentions a couple of points and sends it. Then a couple of weeks later, that was time for Shastri to go to Bombay. Around the same time, DVG had to go to Belgaum for the Kannada Sahitya Sammelana. Shastri and DVG were travelling together in a second class compartment up to Belgaum. From there, Shastri would continue to Bombay and DVG would go to Belgaum. So this compartment had some people, and at Hindupur station, everybody got off. So from Hindupur station onwards, it was just Srinivasa Shastri and DVG. So immediately once he realized that the coach was entirely theirs, then Shastri said, okay, let us speak about Montagu now. I have gone through all the suggestions put forth by my friends. I have noted down the points, and what I have an idea of what are the things I am going to include in my speech. Now I am going to give you a trial speech. You listen to it and tell me what it is, whether I have to make any changes. It will be a good rehearsal for me. So then he sits in front of DVG and gives a full lecture what he planning to give in Bombay, and it is all without a piece of paper, nothing. He gives a lecture. 4 days after this, he gives the lecture in Bombay, and the lecture, whatever he has given us, the summary of that or the details of that are published in the newspaper, and DVG says there is hardly any difference, 99% same. That was the level at which Shastri's memory was, that whatever he has spoken in the trial lecture in the train, 99% same thing was in the paper. That was the memory. And we should appreciate DVG's memory that he remembers. If it was any of us, we would have forgotten what Shastri would have spoken in the train, and what we read here, it will be almost something very fresh. Oh, this is very nice. We would have even forgotten. So DVG, also having such an extraordinary memory, recollects that Shastri's words were exactly the same, whatever he spoke that day. Similar was the way when Shastri used to dictate the essays. Sometimes DVG would be the amanuensis, sometimes other people would take it down. He would think very deeply, and at a stretch, he would dictate 20 to 30 sentences. One after the other, he would have planned for about 20 sentences, and I'm sure many of you can imagine the difficulty of this process. Even to dictate 4 lines, sometimes it is difficult. Only lawyers will know the real challenge, because they have to dictate so much to their stenos. But 20 to 30 sentences at a stretch he would dictate in an unhurried manner, one after the other. And at any point of time, there could be an obstacle when he is dictating this essay. Some friend will come, some relative will come, somebody will, and he will sit with them, he will spend time, and when he gets back to dictating, he will exactly start at the point where he left off. If he had stopped in the middle of a sentence, he would pick it up from that sentence and continue. That was the sort of memory and mental poise that he had. Because he was so sharp, he did not have, he did not need to prepare at all. It appeared that he was never sitting and preparing for something. And also, we had a fantastic vocabulary. The moment he thought of something, words will come running. There is the, the Sanskrit proverb where if it's a great poet, all the words are rushing to him saying, please use me, please use me. Like that, that vocabulary was so good. Anything he thought, words will just flow from his mouth. The big challenge for any speaker or any writer is how much of my speech or how much of my writing should be ornate and beautiful, and how much of it should be plain and sharp and straightforward. Because if you try to make it very ornate and very poetic and suggestive, then the meaning itself may not be very clear. But if you want to really make the meaning as clear as possible, like, in a legal document, all the poetry goes out of it. So a balance between the two is very important for an impressive speaker or impressive writer. Srinivasa Shastri points this out to DVG. He says we have to really discriminate between what kind of usage is truly ornamental and what kind of usage is pretentious. Because we cannot keep aside embellishments in any language. We have to employ literary ornamentations and figures of speech to convey the meaning more accurately. At the same time, we have to ensure that the words are lucid enough and they are creating the impact that we want it on the reader or the listener. Is the usage helping our purpose, or is it merely cosmetic in nature? Is it natural or is it artificial? These are the things that we must examine. Then, as usual, DVG has this formula, 4 things that you can find in V.S. Srinivasa Shastri's lecture. Chatussutri, the 4 cardinal principles. With that, I will conclude today's session. Mana prasannata, equanimity of mind. So, Shastri contemplated on topics for a long time, and he would determine the chronology of how he should present it. He was very clear in his mind. When he spoke, he did not have any and nothing. It was exactly what he wanted to say in a very, very unbroken flow. Then Shabda Saushtava, the structured usage of words. Because of his immense vocabulary, he would pick the words that are most suited for the occasion, the structure that was most apt for the topic. Then Vakya Dhorana, very impactful sentences. So the way in which he spoke, it would be almost like he is just talking to few small people in a friendly, intimate setting. So the strength of a speaker in an audience, if there are thousands of people, every person should think that speaker is speaking to me, and it's almost like a one-to-one conversation. Very few people, very few speakers will have that ability to connect with all the members of the audience. And his lecture would have hasya, humor, it would have anunaya, conviction, udbodhana, education, and prachodana, motivation. So these are all the different qualities. And 4th trait was kantadhvani, voice. Among the fortunes that the divine had conferred upon Shastri, DVG writes, good voice was an important one. Whether he spoke English or Sanskrit or Tamil, his voice and the flow of speech was very soothing to the ears. And if somebody was lazy and lethargic, listening to Shastri would just wake you up and make you completely energetic. So this was the nature of Shastri's speech. There was bhava pushti and bhava prachodana, he says, bolstering of emotions and triggering new emotions. I had hoped to finish Srinivasa Shastri's episode today, but there are so many interesting aspects that I will complete it tomorrow and hopefully cover some more elements from the 6th volume. Thank you all for a patient hearing. Namaste.